Good evening all, and welcome. Some of you might be able to see the join button now. That's a fancy button right next to subscribe that gives you even more perks on the channel. You get access to fancy emojis which my wife designed and made, and a little badge next to your name to show your membership to the channel, as well as a host of other perks if you are so inclined. The information is right there by clicking the button, and it would mean a lot to me if you'd like to support me further. You can also support me on Patreon as well. You get some different and also additional perks if you do so there. Either one are really appreciated. No obligation though, guys. Still much love. But without further ado, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. My most recent paranormal experience happened in August of 2019. To preface, my older cousin Charlie had passed away in late July, and his death hit my family pretty hard. It was very unexpected, and within a week of finding out, we had to drive 9 hours to North Carolina for the wake and funeral, stay 2 nights, and then drive 9 more hours back home. It was truly one of the hardest things I've ever had to go through. Earlier in the year, the rest of my family had planned a trip to Portugal that very same week that we ended up having to go to our cousin's funeral. Since the trip had been planned so in advance and the death was so sudden, they were unable to cancel the trip. So a few days after the 18-hour round trip to North Carolina, my family packed up to go to Portugal and visit our grandmother. I, however, was not going on the trip with them. I had to stay home and take care of our cat. He has this medical condition that we have to keep up with him every day, and we didn't want to have to ask another family member to watch him for 10 days while we were gone. So I ended up staying with him home alone in our 5-bedroom, 3-story house for about a week and a half with my cat. With everything that happened within those 2 weeks prior to my family leaving, I was not in a great headspace, so I was quote-unquote self-medicating with the green stuff. My parents don't really know that I'm a stoner, so with my entire family being gone, I was able to smoke freely in our backyard for most of the days and relax with my cat. One night I was sitting in bed and decided to smoke a little bit in my bedroom before I went to sleep, which I never really did in the house. Since my family was still going to be gone for a few days, I figured the smell would have dissipated by the time they got home. I smoked a small bowl and just went to bed as normal. A little before 5 a.m. I was awoken to a loud banging in my room. My eyes shot open, and I looked around the room but saw nothing. Thoughts were racing through my head. What was in my room? Was it somewhere else in the house? Maybe it was my cat that knocked something over in the hallway. Or was it another animal? We've had some squirrels in the attic recently, but wouldn't I also hear little animal feet scratching? I heard nothing. My room was silent, my heart was absolutely pounding, and after maybe 45 minutes of wanting to either see or hear something else, exhaustion hit me, and I fell back asleep until the morning. When I woke up the next morning, I look around my room to see if I could find the source of the sound. I find on my floor a heavy, hardwood cover book that had been displayed on my bookshelf that had fallen off the shelf, which was at least 6 feet above the ground. In my 20 years of living in that house, I've never had anything so concrete and unexplainable happen to me. The book had been placed standing up on its side with at least 3 inches from the edge of the shelf. I had had it sitting there for at least 3 years and it hadn't moved at all. The shelf was perfectly level and was not any slant forward. There also wasn't any opening that I could visibly see where an animal could have gotten in. In the days prior to this happening, I hadn't even gone over the area of my room or moved things around. I showed my dad, who was a complete skeptic, what happened after my family got home from the trip, and he really couldn't explain it. The words, "maybe it was a ghost," even escaped his mouth. The rest of my family is not and never have been interested in the paranormal. I'm sort of the odd one out. Growing up in that regard, I did have an imaginary friend, the name of which happened to be the previous homeowner of the house who had passed away. I had a very minor paranormal experience while in middle school, seeing some orbs in my bedroom, and just the general feeling of being watched. The feelings sort of went away as I got older, but my sister, who would sometimes stay in my room while I was away at college, would tell me it felt like there were eyes on her when she would sleep. I guess I just got used to it as I got older. My mother used to tell me that when I was very young, I would talk to someone who I would call the lady. When she asked me about this lady, I would describe a kindly middle-aged woman who stood in the doorway between the living room and the kitchen and spoke to me. She never moved from the doorway. Of course, it freaked my parents out a bit, but they always figured that it was just an imaginary friend. But what kind of kid has a middle-aged lady as an imaginary friend who never moves from one spot? I don't remember anything about the lady though. I do, however, remember a strange incident one night. I was reading comics after bedtime by the light that used to come into the room from the landing when I became aware of someone coming up the stairs. So I did what every kid does and pretended to be asleep so I didn't get in trouble. But I kept a sneaky eye open so that I could return to my comic once the coast was clear. The person approached the top of the steps, paused, and then came into my room. I could see it was a man and assumed it was my father checking on me, but rather than come forwards towards the bed, the man started pulling at an old nail-up hatch in the ceiling. It gave 2 or 3 different pulls from different directions and then left the room. I was absolutely convinced that it had been my father, but not wanting to get in trouble, I didn't mention it for about a week, when my curiosity got the better of me. I asked him what he had been doing and why he had been pulling at the hatch. He had never been to my room at night, and certainly had no interest in an old and entirely unusable hatch, when there was a perfectly operational hatch to the same place in his own room. The last vaguely supernatural experience I ever experienced was many years later. I had been out for a few drinks with my friends, a regular occurrence which always ended up with a longer walk back to town, some 3 miles into the countryside. I had no torch and mobile phones weren't yet common enough for me to have one. The last half mile was through a wood with an old quarry to one side, which was always a little unsettling, as you could hear the screech of tortured metal in the wind, or an unseen animal rustling through the undergrowth. However, there were a pair of white dogs who lived on the other side of the woods who would always join me as I walked past, and they accompanied me through the woods, and I was always grateful for having them with me, especially since they were so easy to see by the moonlight. Once we got there, to the other side of the woods, they would turn back and head home. Then one night they came bounding up to us as usual and walked with me right up until we got to the edge of the woods, at which point they stopped, pricked their ears towards the wood and ran away. Naturally, quite a lot of poo came out, but since I had no choice but to go through the woods, I bailed on experiencing the journey as hard as possible by singing at the top of my own voice and moving as quickly as possible until I had cleared the woods and arrived home. But the strange bit was that I never saw those dogs again. My friend Ed was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in April of a certain year. By July of that same year, he had been in hospital for about a month. His wife told me the night before he told her the strangest thing. He'd seen his father, uncles, and other relatives that had already passed on standing around his bed smiling at him. I told my wife to pack a few bags because within the next 2 days we would be getting the message that Ed had passed on. Surely enough, almost 2 days later, Ed's wife contacted us to tell us he had. How did I know? Ed was about the 5th person I knew personally that had contracted cancer then passed from it, and each of them had mentioned a day or 2 before they finally passed away that they'd seen dead relatives standing around their beds or standing in their rooms, smiling at them. Back in 2012, when I got out of high school, me and my significant other at the time rented a trailer here in our town. We moved in and got settled, but I knew something was weird about the place from the beginning. The trailer was always so hot, even with the air conditioning on it would still be 90 degrees. The back bedroom was painted this horrible blue color, but you could still see some sort of stain on the walls under the paint. Think about the square diamonds mirror that are in the trailers. The stains were outlined under the paint. I was working at a Dairy Queen at the time, and was talking about where we had moved to and just talking about how strange the place was. We live in an extremely rural town, population of maybe 2,000, so everybody knows everybody. A lady I worked with told me that that trailer was the one that Annie was murdered in. Everyone in town remembers the murder. It was over some drugs. She had been homecoming queen turned addict, and it was a big deal. My cousin came and spent the night, and I told him that we had heard about the trailer. He started provoking the spirit and saying, "Come get me then." At that moment, the electricity starts blinking, and a moving box falls off the table. After that night, everything escalated quickly. The next week, we were laying in bed watching The Devil Inside, and it sounded like someone had a shotgun right next to our head. It scared us both to death. So my significant other at the time got up to check the rest of the house, and nothing had been touched or went off. We went to his parents for the evening for dinner and honestly just to get out the house. We came home around midnight and went to bed. He fell asleep, but I lay there. I felt like something was watching me. Our bed was facing the hallway, and I could feel something watching me from there. I wasn't having sleep paralysis. I had just laid down. Whatever it was crawled on top of me, and I could feel its breath on my neck, and it smelled bad. I was trying to wake my significant other. I was crying and couldn't move. I was holding my arms down, and finally I got my partner awake and he turned on the light. I never went to sleep that night. Another night we had some friends over for pizza and Halo. I was making the pizza, and I had a stack of plates on the counter, getting ready to serve. Then the whole stack of plates completely levitated off the counter. Everyone was completely in shock, but I was used to it by then. We finally ended up moving out about a week after. When I was around 2, I had an attachment that I described to my mum as a Native American chief. Obviously, I have no recollection of this has been told to me. She told me I used to run from him screaming and crying, and after I was well past her, she could feel a burst of cold air follow. He tormented me day and night, until she did some type of cleansing to banish him and placed a white candle in my window to keep him away. For as long as I can remember, she made sure I knew I couldn't move the candle, and it always followed us when we moved. We had a family friend who I referred to as Uncle John, though he had no relation to me. Apparently I adored the man, and he would get me to dance a lot. After he passed, I would still talk to him and do the dance randomly. Around this time, a family member went to the hospital, and while in the room I was looking out of the window and said, "Mummy, look at all the angels out there." She said this is probably one of the scariest things I've ever said to her, but she can't really pinpoint why it was so frightening. Most of my childhood was fairly quiet after that, which I gave the candle credit for until my parents divorced and started dating again when I was in middle school. My dad met Margaret, who's a paranormal investigator, and specifically could sketch spirits, and I immediately adored her because I've always been interested in scary stuff. But my dad was a huge skeptic. There's a very small, very old cemetery a ways behind my dad's house, so she decided we were going to do a mini investigation there one night. I was in charge of taking pictures while she tried to get EVPs. We couldn't hear or see anything while there, but I told her I could feel something. Without telling me what she was feeling, she asked me questions such as, "Do you feel they're male or female? Do they seem younger or older?" I told her I thought there was a younger boy and his dad, to which she agreed. Soon after this, one of my legs started feeling cold and electrified, what most people describe when feeling touched by a spirit. We went back to check the pictures and recordings and found I had caught a lot of what appeared to be orbs. Most were white, but in some of the pictures we kept seeing, one was red. Upon listening, we heard a child, a man, a woman, and someone who sounded incredibly angry, maybe because we weren't aware of her. Even my dad was a bit taken aback and felt shaken because he couldn't explain it. Soon after, they broke up, and that was the end of my amateur ghost hunting days. A while later, when I was 16 or 17, my mum remarried and we rented a house that was surrounded by forest at least half a mile from the road. The bedrooms were on the opposite ends of the house and each had a private bathroom, and mine also had its own porch. Initially, I loved it. My own bathroom and porch? Hell yeah! But soon I realized that I never felt alone. It was worse on the porch or in the bathroom, but my closet doors were mirrors, and I always felt very afraid of them. The first thing I noticed was that I hated my bathroom window. Even with the candle in it, I always felt like someone was looking at me despite it being forest behind the house. I never looked at it and spent as little time as possible in the bathroom as I could. I felt the same way outside because behind the porch, the area was forest. But I could never shake that feeling that some of the sounds never felt right. Obviously, some of it had to be living creatures in the woods, but some of the things I heard made my gut freak out. I knew it wasn't just an animal somehow. One thing I forgot to mention is that my bedroom had a smaller room attached to it, that I eventually made my bedroom, while the original became my personal living room. I just couldn't stand sleeping in front of all those mirrors because the closet took up a whole wall. That room really didn't feel any better though, and I once took a picture that had a screaming face in it. The most chilling incident had to be the ghost creature though. My room attached to the kitchen on one side and the living room attached to the other. I was in the kitchen making food and out of the corner of my eye I see what I thought was my mum's blue healer go into my room and under my bed, which was weird because he was far too fat to fit under the bed. I turn and walk into the living room only to see both dogs fast asleep on the couch. I stayed far away from the room for a few hours after that. Now I no longer have a candle. I moved so many times in a few years that I lost it, and things are mostly normal. There was also one further experience that happened to my mother. Many years ago, my mum worked as an overnight CNA at a nursing home. I've seen this almost exact type of experience spoken of from other nursing homes after she told me, and I think the consistency is amazing. There were 3 spirits who roamed the halls, and they named them the Lady in White, the Man in Black, and the Priest. The first 2 descriptions were obvious, and the priest was a greyish apparition. They knew when the residents were close to passing, when they mentioned one of the 3 visiting them in their room, or when they saw the apparition enter a room. Additionally, they always died in 3s. They all agreed the Lady in White was to escort to heaven, the Man in Black was for hell, and they weren't sure about the 3rd. Now the scariest thing my mum has ever told me is that I truly hope I never experience. She awoke in the middle of the night to a spectre standing above her. She saw his face and knew she was looking at death himself. To this day, she doesn't know why he was there or what he was doing. All that she knows is that she nearly crapped herself. She was quite unsettled and yet calm. I wonder if she was supposed to pass that night, but he had mercy on her. I'm glad he didn't take her, and hope he waits a long time before he returns. I grew up in eastern Kentucky, and my parents were in the military. One went to Iraq to fight the war, then came back. The other got deployed within a year to Iraq/Afghanistan. My parents were not the best because they were going through a lot of their own emotional struggles related to PTSD. Both were heavy alcoholics and they cheated on each other all the time. By this time I was 10, when my dad was gone after my mum came back, and it reached its peak. She would go out to bars all night and leave me and my sociopathic brother home alone to fend for ourselves. One night she was actually home, and for some reason I was terrified to go into my room, so I asked if I could sleep in my mum's room while she watched TV in the living room. She said it was okay, and I went and climbed into bed and started hearing this noise, like a clicking noise. I looked over to where I thought it was coming from, my mum's closet. I felt uncomfortable, so I went out the room and tried to play it off like I wasn't tired yet, but my mum made me go back in. As soon as I got in the bed and looked over at the closet, one of her shoes was floating 1.5 feet off the ground. I jumped out of bed and scrambled out the room so fast I told my mum what happened, and she said she would come lay with me until I went to sleep. I'm pretty sure she thought I was just being a kid, monsters under the bed kind of deal. Then she started hearing the clicking too. She got freaked out and made my brother sleep in the room with us for everyone's safety. The clicking continued and we felt very uncomfortable and unsafe. We finally fell asleep after we all prayed continuously. In the middle of the night, my mum had to use the restroom, so she turned on the light to her ensuite. The yellow bulb blew up, sending glass everywhere, and almost immediately after, a wind rushed down the hallway and knocked all the pictures off the wall, and then there was silence. There were no doors or windows open, the air wasn't on, and it was to this day the strangest thing that's ever happened to me. I think all of the built-up emotion from everyone in the house compounded and created this, perhaps. This poltergeist. The house was quieter after that, but our family struggles continued until it broke apart, for the better, and everyone could move on. When I was younger, my grandma told me a story about when she was a teenager. She was walking down a road with a boy that she was dating, when all of a sudden this dog came up to them and walked beside them, keeping pace. The dog was basically transparent, and my grandma and the boy pretended they couldn't see it until it vanished. I am a 36-year-old woman, and while growing up in our house, we always knew it was haunted. We had an old lady and an old man spirit, who we called the Shadow Man, at our home. When my stepdad would do things he shouldn't be doing, he'd wake up with these weird scratches on his back. They looked like someone had taken a pin and carved them in. When I was younger, all of us kids would watch these lights flicker on and off in our house, and our grandma's rocking chair would also start to swing entirely on its own. When I was 15 or 16, I would sleep during the day, as I've always been a night person, and one time I awoke because the upper part of my right leg felt like it was on fire. When I looked at the spot that felt like it was on fire, I noticed that there was an upside-down cross engraved on my leg. Fast forward. In 2004, I had my daughter. She was sleeping in her bouncy seat that I had sitting on the floor, and after she'd been sleeping for a while, I stopped the bouncy seat from bouncing. I was relaxing on the couch with my daughter sleeping, and all of a sudden her bouncy seat started going off by itself. I wasn't scared, more comforted and peaceful. I thought it was my grandma trying to comfort me. After I had my third child, me and my husband split up. He was quite abusive. We were staying in a domestic violence shelter that was also haunted. It said that there was a woman that lived there when it was a single-family home, and the mother had ended the life of her child. At the time, we were the only ones staying there. One night, my kids were sleeping, and I was walking down the hall to go downstairs when I heard a child call out, "Mummy?" I knew it wasn't my kids since they were asleep, and I pretended not to hear it, as it was just easier for me to do so. The last night that we were there, we had been watching a movie and eating popcorn. After my kids fell asleep, I went downstairs to wash the popcorn bowl. When I went back upstairs to our room, there was a pillow over my son's face. My kids were all in separate beds, and the pillow over his face had come from the bed which was on the other side of the room. I rushed over to him and removed the pillow, and ended up calling my husband, and we returned to live with him. In the summer of 2015, I was outside smoking a cigarette, and it was dark. Any time I would be outside at night, I would look up to the stars and just relax. One night I was outside, and across the street, above the trees, there was this huge set of lights. The lights were in the shape of an arrow. There were several different colors to it. Each arrows were of different colors, but they were connected. It didn't really make much sense to me. I pretended I didn't see it until I finished smoking my cigarette. Then I went inside to get my husband and told him about it. And he went back outside with me, only to see it had been gone. 2 years down the line, I left my husband for good and moved into my own place. One morning I woke up to what felt like someone trying to suffocate me with their hands over my nose and mouth, even though I was not able to see anyone standing over me. I was fighting to try and breathe, and it took me a little bit to be able to breathe. I was yelling at whatever it was, and after a little bit, whatever it was left. Only it left behind fingerprints on my face and throat. Later that day, my neighbors asked me what happened because the fingerprints on me turned to dark bruises. I work in the home healthcare field. My job title is DSP, Direct Support Provider, and I work with mentally disabled adults. And there is something about mentally disabled people that draws spirits to them, in my opinion. There were nights the pounding on the walls and ceilings would be so loud that clients would wake up. One night I was cleaning, and in between where I swept the staff bathroom to where I went to mop the floor, there appeared to what looked like blood droplets on the floor. Another night I was cleaning the commons area or living room, and all of a sudden I heard this low, deep growl sound. You know, like the type of growl a dog does before it attacks. Keep in mind, there is really thick plexiglass on the windows, so you won't be able to hear a dog growling outside. This growling came from what sounded like one of my clients' bedrooms. I pretended that it was one of the clients, as again, it is just easier for me to do that so that I don't walk off the job. When my boss came in that morning, I asked her if we got a dog that I didn't know about. She told me no, and I told her what I heard. When I came in later that night for shift, she told me that another DSP was outside smoking a cigarette, and they both heard the same thing. The other DSP ran inside the house so fast, her feet barely touched the deck. One night I was at work, and my kids were scared out their minds. My 2 boys fell asleep in bed together because they were playing on the PlayStation. My older son woke up with a pillow over his face. He tried to get it off but wasn't able to get it off, and he ended up repeatedly kicking my youngest son to get him to wake up. When my youngest son woke up, even he had trouble removing the pillow. Eventually, the 2 of them were able to do it and called me up crying, terrified. About a month ago, my boyfriend and I were at our house drinking. I was sitting with my back to the open window. I only had 2 shots of tequila at that point, and I have a big phoenix tattoo on my left shoulder. All of a sudden, the lines of the phoenix were raised. It was almost as if someone recarved the lines of the phoenix. Keep in mind, I've had this tattoo for 4 years, so the lines of the phoenix shouldn't have been raised like they were. It burned so bad I was nearly crying. About 3 weeks ago, I was at work. The window was closed, so there wasn't any breeze going through the house in the window. I was in a commons area cleaning when I heard a crash come from the office. The flashlight had been thrown to the middle of the floor. That same week I was cleaning the kitchen at work. I was listening to the song Down by the River to Pray from the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? My clients were sleeping, and that song was playing, and I heard the deep, dark, evil laugh. Again, I pretended it was one of my clients so that I wouldn't walk off the job. The thing is that no one else has been dealing with this other than I, and I think it might be following me. If anyone has any idea on what I can do to get this thing to stop following me around, it would be greatly appreciated. I can't use sage because I'm highly allergic. My family also has reason to believe that we're cursed, so any advice on that would also be greatly regarded. We built our house on an empty lot, giant oak tree, but other than that, no evidence of anything ever being here. Rather than walking through to our front door, which you have to walk through the muddy grass yard to get through when it rains, we come in through the garage. When you enter the garage, there's a small room you go through no bigger than a closet, about 4 by 4 feet, called the mudroom, where we hang coats and put our boots, and then you enter a second door into the kitchen. Right beside the kitchen is a door that used to be to our guest bedroom. This was for my grandparents when they would come visit, and was right by the door because my grandmother couldn't climb stairs. Today, though, they have moved closer to us, from 5 hours to 5 minutes down the road. We turned the room into a schoolroom at first. My younger sibling is homeschooled. There's an old-fashioned school desk, a shelf, the mattress from the guest bed against the wall, a cookbook, shelf, a dresser that has been there since the guest room was still a sleeping room, and a lamp by the nightstand. Anyway, a while ago on Twitter there was something you may have heard of. It was called Dear David. It was the story of a guy who started seeing this kid ghost in his house, and it's a long, long thread that's absolutely terrifying. To this day I can't read it, unfortunately. When I go to find the link, it looks like it may have been deleted, but I'm sure you can still find it. Anyway, the day after I read the real story thread, I was walking past the schoolroom, and I swear to you I saw a little boy. My heart dropped. I thought I was going to puke on the spot, but I didn't. I fumbled for the light switch by the sink without breaking eye contact and got a look, but it was nothing. Just the nightstand and a lamp. It rubbed me the wrong way. I just couldn't get that gut feeling of dread to go away. You've heard paralyzed with fear, but you don't really understand it until you can't move, breathe, or scream. But as everything, things fade with time. I never read the thread again and started working very early in the morning, so when I'd get up to leave my house it would be quite dark. And that room, it's like the dark coming from that room is so pitch black you can't even see through the doorway. It's been years and I still can't. Every time I look in that room, the hair on my whole body stands wrong. I can't stop looking over my shoulder when I'm in the kitchen after dark, even when my whole family is awake with me. In the daytime, I can't go out there comfortably. I just feel like there's something right behind me, always just out of view, but behind me. Even to reach in there to flip the light on. I'm scared, irrationally, that a hand will come out from the dark and grab me. I've started closing that door and keep it shut 24/7. No matter what I do, it always seems to end up open, mostly because my mother sets her bag down there after work, but some days, even after I've shut it, it's cracked open. And I can't explain it. I would say I'm not paranoid of David anymore, although that particular story still terrifies me. I do absolutely believe in it and respect that entity. I don't think he ever was in my home. I think I was just afraid. But what could I have seen and why did it leave such a lasting impact on me? It's gotten to the point of fearing the dark in that room, that it's traveled onto others. When I come down the stairs in the morning, I shut the door to the workspace/office when I use the bathroom. I check the shower for anything/anyone before locking myself in the bathroom, even when I'm home alone. In the dark, it just seems like that room itself holds something scary, and that it could travel to any of the darkest rooms in the house. Even my bedroom has lights all night that could stay on. My whole point in sharing this is to get insight on what could be going on, and why that one room could form a paranoia of every dark room in the house, why I can no longer even look at the door without feeling uncomfortable, and that something's watching me. Could the story have really left me that scared without involving me? Or could I have done something, maybe had such an emotional reaction, that it lured something to me? I'm 25, and I currently went back to living in my mum's house temporarily, as I recover from a nasty relationship. About a week ago, my mum and I were talking, and she was telling me about her rough childhood. I knew my mum once messed with a Ouija board when she was younger, but I thought it was just the once. To my surprise, she told me she was a medium. She constantly spoke with the dead when she had the chance. She had my half-brothers at 16, and she messed around with the paranormal. My grandma also had my mum when she was 16 and did the same thing of speaking with the dead and practicing witchcraft, and I guess it also showed my mum. My grandma was horrible to my mother. She neglected her, abused her, and even left her starving and ate in front of her. My mum said grandma didn't know any better, and so my mum wanted to mess around with the paranormal for attention. I think she felt very attached to speaking with the dead. Years passed by, and she's currently a Jehovah's Witness, and has been for 20 years. In 1994 I was born, and I was born into their religious beliefs. In my opinion, my childhood was rough because of their religious beliefs pushed onto me. Little did I know I was, today, years old, realizing that my mum was running away from her curse. She feels protected by her religious beliefs and did not let the paranormal entities bother her. That, and I mean she had a rough childhood and tried to look for God. My youngest half-brother always tells my mum that he is always being bothered by ghosts. He tells us his stories every time he comes over to visit. I wonder, did my mum have a curse on her side of the family? But how come I never had anything happen to me? Not that I wish I can see something scary, but I noticed I've never had a paranormal experience in my life. Never seen a ghost, nor demon, nor anything that goes bump in the night. Well, maybe one bump, but I feel like it can be explained by a cat. The closest thing I had to an experience was when I was outside leaning against my car with my boyfriend at the time having a cigarette, and reminiscing the scary scenes after watching a horror movie at the theatre. We were both caught off guard when suddenly the neighbour's house across the street had its mailbox door swivel open. There was no one around and there was no wind, and yet I feel like my boyfriend had this aura of bad luck, or attracted a spirit that bothered him. Why I say that? Because he told me he also had paranormal experiences alone, but he believes it's on the land he lives on. Another time I had sleep paralysis, which I'm not sure if it relates to the paranormal, but I was on summer break, 16, and I'm used to my mom waking up early and go to take her to work for her housekeeping job. She would pay me cash for helping her. Waking up at 7 was painful, and many times I would end up not going. She usually would knock on my bedroom door loudly, yell my name and tell me to get up. All of a sudden I wake up, but I'm only half awake. I can't move, but I can see my bedroom door. I see a shadowy figure opening the door, the same shape of my mum, and she's walking around me slowly, but talking to me in her voice. The figure got close to me at my bedside, and it was like my chest was being pushed down and I couldn't breathe. Then I woke up and went down the hallway, and my mum said she was downstairs the whole time and about to leave for work. I refused to let curiosity get the best out of me and try speaking to the dead. But does this mean I am not cursed, or do I have a strong aura? Do I have good luck? Do I have a strong soul? I don't really know. I also have a story my mum wanted to share. My mum knows when I low-key watch horror movies in our home because at night time she feels bothered or has some sort of anxiety build up, like a presence watching her. My grandma took people's photos and put curses on them. For example, she had a male friend who his girlfriend was trying to leave him. My grandma got mad and took a photo of both of them and did like this, binding spell so they stay together forever. The girl never left him, but is in an unhappy relationship and does not know why she keeps coming back. They're still together to this day. My mum was sleeping on the couch, and she woke up to her dad's bedroom door shaking and trembling, each second more loud. Then the sound of the hands slamming against the door. She yelled and the noise stopped. She checked if her dad was around, and she came through the door saying he was outside the whole time. My mom's sister did witchcraft. My mother took her witchcraft book away and tried to destroy it outside. She took a match to it and tried to light it on fire, but it didn't burn. So she tossed it off a cliff and said that no one would ever find it. When out of nowhere, it came flying down at them. They ran away and never returned for the book. During the time of her being a Jehovah's Witness, she wanted to help people who were studying Bible to stop some minor paranormal activity in her home. She visited them and saw books flying like birds. She ran away and the couple moved out and sold the house. My mum said that one time in her 20s she was sleeping alone in her home and she felt a big hand grope her and go down on her. Then she lifted the bedsheet for no one to be there. One night she was sleeping and my half-brothers of 5 and 7 had to go potty in the middle of the night. The oldest was helping his youngest brother go, and the youngest said angrily, "I can't go, there's a small guy with a huge hat staring and smiling next to the toilet." My oldest brother said he couldn't see anything. They both went to tell my mum next morning, and it turns out she'd been playing with a Ouija board with her sister and brother, and her 2 sons were sitting and watching. There was a moment when she felt half her face and body just go numb. She doesn't remember saying anything, but she thinks she got possessed for a split second. Her brother was next to her on the Ouija when he said in Spanish, "¿Qué miras, clavos?" Translation, "What are you looking at, nails?" staring at my mum's oldest son with a sinister smile. My mum's brother bowed his head and came back to normal. She didn't remember what happened. My mum was freaking out because her uncle who passed away was the only one who called her oldest son Clavos. That nickname was given to my brother because his hair was so thick, so when he got a haircut, his hair would stick out like a bunch of nails. I am a sensitive. I have seen and experienced the paranormal since I was little. My experiences range from surprising to scary and can happen anytime. I don't control it. The one thing I can count on, though, is something almost always happens to me around Halloween. I'm sure most people know that Halloween is the time where the veil between the worlds is thinnest. It's not just that day. Sometimes as much as 2 weeks before and after Halloween, the veil is thin enough to severely affect sensitives. I have a few sensitive friends and know that some can even feel the veil thinning. Responses to the veil range depend on sensitivity, and I have experienced lucid dreaming, vivid dreams, and severe anxiety. I do have anxiety, which I medicate for, and last Halloween I had a panic attack come out of nowhere. I was shaking and could hardly breathe for no reason. I barely made it back to the car. I know it was because of the veil. I don't usually have those attacks since starting my medicine, and I went back to the same mall a few months later to experience no anxiety. I don't remember everything that happens on Halloween, so the experiences I do remember are usually among the scariest. I will start with the one that happened the longest time ago. That Halloween I had a few things happen to me as expected. I can't remember them since they didn't really stand out. This experience was more creepy than scary. It was either Halloween night or just after. I couldn't sleep, so I was playing on my phone in the dark. I decided it was time to make myself sleep. So I went to put my phone down, and when I did, I saw a dark cat-sized shadow jumping to my face. I jerked back, thinking it was my black cat, and that it had jumped from the nightstand to my bed. I never felt her land on the bed. I looked around for her just to realize she was asleep on the other side of my bed. She would have had to climb over me to lay there from that angle. It took me a while to sleep that night. This next one is my sister's experience. It happened either the same year or a little after. She isn't as sensitive as I am, so her experiences are fewer but stand out more. She was riding home with her boyfriend from the Halloween gathering they'd gone to. It was dark, of course, when he pulled into the driveway to our house. She said the lights landed on something large running on all fours. It was humanoid-shaped. He didn't see it. She told me about it, and I told her it was fine. She was inside, and I told her not to go outside again that night. Last Halloween was my most active one. It was a week or so before my panic attack. I also had several lucid dreams and one very vivid dream that I still cannot convince myself was just a dream. I saw so much more than ghosts. I have a job that requires me to go to customers' houses to try and contact with them. I was doing what I was supposed to do when these 2 incidents occurred. I can't remember if they happened or not on the same night. It was just before Halloween, and I was on dimly lit back roads in my small town. In my town, most of the back roads are dark, so I was lucky to have some extra light. I rounded a curve and my lights lit up something standing on the other side of a fence. It was a grey mass that seemed almost two-dimensional. The best way to describe it would be almost like the reports of Bigfoot. It was taller than a human, but shaped similarly. It was not Bigfoot though. It had no definition to it, and I believe it belonged to a different place. I drove faster after seeing it and took a different road back. The next thing I saw was very similar to the previous creature except it flew. I was in my own car with the way the windshield slants, and I only saw it for a moment. It was almost like a pterodactyl, but was grey and had no definition like the other one. I describe it that way for lack of a better way. Obviously, I don't think we have extinct flying dinosaurs in my small town of Tennessee. These creatures sound absurd, I know, and even I would have had a hard time believing someone when they described them. My last experience of that Halloween was the most terrifying experience I've ever had. I was pulling into my driveway at night after getting off work. It was late, and everyone else would have gone to bed by then. It was the first time I had seen anything like it, and hopefully the last. I understand why my sister freaked out that time. A large humanoid creature on all fours was running through the yard. It was only a few seconds that I had seen it, but it was close. It was big, maybe twice the size of our chocolate lab. Once we passed each other, I didn't see it again. Needless to say, I made a mad dash into the house and wouldn't let the dogs out to use the bathroom. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. I'd like to thank all our lovely members who actually picked tonight's topic by using the exclusive voting feature for members only. If you'd like to be a member or a patron, the link is there to members and it's with the join button, and the link to Patreon is in the description. Either way, thank you so much. Not obligatory, 100% optional, just sticking it out there if you guys are interested. Thank you guys. Alright then, I hope you liked these paranormal stories. I certainly did. I like all things ghosty and scary. For those of you who read the secret message section yesterday, was it yesterday? Yes, it was yesterday. Sorry, my sense of time is warped. Well, I went for my medical thing, and I got, the needle in the arm, got my blood drained out. I couldn't even look. I had to put on a video on my phone in my left hand and look away the whole time. I couldn't even look. And I thought that I'd be braver once it was done, and I think, it's not that bad, but I still just hate getting injections, and the thought of it I find unbearable. I guess it is a very real phobia. So there you go. I don't like needles. If you liked today's video, you be sure to leave a like and do all that stuff. I've been told that by saying this, it never works, so I should probably stop saying it really. But thank you for watching. If there's a story of something scary that's happened to you and you would like to share it with me, you can send it to my email, which is in the description. And a huge thanks to my Patreons and members whose names are on screen. You guys are awesome. Seriously, thank you. But for now, it's time for me to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.